I am driving about an hour and a half north of San Francisco. I'm coming from spending the day in Davis with a colleague and friend. The mid-August sun is setting. The sky is a brilliant purple, and I am enjoying my time alone. I have some time to reflect and appreciate the hills, the golden grass, the trees that sporadically dot those hills, the scenes of nature that are whirring by me. There is something meditative and beautiful about driving at this time of year, I decide, and I'm completely absorbed by it. Suddenly, I start to notice that my eyes are getting itchy, and my throat is feeling a bit dry. I start to cough. It smells like a charcoal grill is smoking, burning. I don't think too much about it. I keep driving, noticing only that the smell is becoming stronger and more overpowering. I soon turn a corner, and it is laid out before me in all of its jagged ugliness. A significant side of a hill is burned. The earth is black, scorched. The soil is ashen. Some trees have been burned down to black stumps. Any trace of gold of the grasses is long gone. It looks like the bottom of a charcoal grill days after the cookout. What lies before me is nothing but a long scar of earth kissed by flames. I'm feeling dazed by the awfulness of it. My mind goes to why this happened, whether it was a controlled burn or lightning or a part of a larger burn. I had heard of fires up this way, and in this moment wonder whether anyone has been harmed by them. And I'm wondering how long it will take for this land, this patch here, to recover. What I do know is that what had been a pleasurable, carefree drive is disrupted by the scene that is before me. I am jerked out of my own world by something that is harsh and ugly. I can't look away. Even the sky looks diminished here, its purple hue pallid against the burned earth. I push on, winding my way around another bend. The scorched part of the earth disappears. The gold returns to the hills, and a flock of birds flies overhead, oblivious to what lies behind me. The only trace is a smoke that sits heavily in the air, making it hard to breathe. I have not been with you in the pulpit since the shooting in Charleston, and I can't believe how long that seems. The shooting happened days after I left for the General Assembly of our denomination and then went on sabbatical and vacation. And each new day brought a new disturbing detail about that crime, that the shooter was motivated by a profound racial animus, that he had exhibited signs of real disturbance, that despite all that he was given, and despite all of that, he was given a gun by his family. And then there's the most disturbing details of all, that he was able to sit with the members of Mother Emanuel Church, listen to their heartfelt prayers for nearly an hour, and then mercilessly shoot them. Like so many, my heart was broken open by this news. I wanted to be able to do something. I wanted to be able to say something. I wanted to be able to change something. But what was apparent is that there was little I could do or say or change. Embedded in my skin was this splinter that I could not remove. I just had to walk with it. I am still walking with it. In the following weeks, I went to Cincinnati. This is where my family lives and where I grew up. When I was a young adult, I lived in Clifton, right next to the University of Cincinnati. Weekly, I would pass the sprawling city campus on my way out to dinner or to see friends who live in the neighborhood, or to visit my home church, St. John's Unitarian, which is also right next to the University of Cincinnati. On July 19th, just as I was arriving in Cincinnati to visit, Samuel DuBose was pulled over for a minor traffic violation 2 blocks from the campus. In the video that was later posted online, it seems that he was cooperating with the officer. At one point, they started to argue. And then, in what was one of the most harrowing and tragic moments that I have seen this summer, and that says a lot, the officer pulled out a gun and shot DuBose in the face. The car speeds forward and hits a pole. The tension in Cincinnati is as palpable as smoke that burns the eyes and the lungs. And I am finding that my heart is torn open yet again. Another death, another life taken without reason. I find myself pulled between desperately wanting to be able to do something that is hopeful and healing and feeling like there is little that I have the power to do. I feel trapped between a pressing and urgent desire to change our broken and hurting world and a resignation or frustration that nothing can be done. Ralph Waldo Emerson knows something about this. The one-time Unitarian minister who resigned his pastorate over an issue of conscience wrote sporadically about the grief and the sorrow in our world, and he had reason to do so. When he was finishing up his studies at Harvard College in preparation for ministry, he met a woman named Ellen Tucker. For the first and only time in his life, he fell madly and deeply in love. Ralph Waldo proposed marriage at the same time that he accepted a call to the Second Church of Boston as the junior pastor. During that time, he was being groomed for the senior pastorate of this established and well-known church. He was a rising star in the Unitarian world. But for the young minister, it all fell to earth when his wife of only 18 months died. Emerson wrote of trying to find comfort in his religion, in his faith, but discovered that he was increasingly unable to do so. He finally broke from his congregation, citing the fact that he could no longer administer Holy Communion, but it is likely that his grief played a large part in that decision. And this would not be Emerson's only loss. After losing his first wife, he married again and had children. He moved to Concord and worked as an essayist and a lecturer. But that new life would also not be free of tragedy. His oldest son, Waldo, would contract scarlet fever and die in early childhood. In a wrenching and open-hearted poem, he writes of the loss of his son. The poem is titled Threnody, which translates into, "For this losing is true dying." Only 2 years later, Emerson would pen some of his most prolific and well-known essays, including The Poet, Gifts, and Nature. But it was his essay Experience that he would write directly in response to his son's death. And it is a meditation on how one meets the darker feelings of suffering and pain when they arrive at our doorstep. As I have been contemplating how one should encounter all of this heartbreak in the world, all of this heartbreak that we have held this summer, I have returned to and reread this essay. There are some real gems here. Emerson notes that our life experience of the world is one of rapidly changing temperaments and events and occasions. He writes, "The secret of the illusoriness of the world is in the necessity of a succession of moods or objects. Gladly we would try to anchor, but anchorage is on quicksand. In other words, the moment that we think that we have anchored, the next thing in the world imposes itself upon us. We are pulled forward inexorably. But Emerson does not counsel a turning away from life, an ascetic's or a renunciate's position. Just because these experiences blow in and out of our lives does not mean that we should retreat. Instead, Emerson defines this as the very challenge of life. He writes that the only medicine that he knows of is a respect for the present hour. He goes on, I settle myself ever firmer in the creed that we should not postpone and refer and wish, but rather do broad justice to where we are. His image of someone who does broad justice to where they are is the artist. For Emerson, the artist refuses to let life drift by even when its fruit is heartbreak. The artist is able to take and turn and view and show that experience to others. And in that process of turning and viewing and showing, the artist, writes Emerson, stands on the brink of an ocean of thought and power. The artist realizes the truth, he continues, that life has no luster unless you turn it in your hand until you come to that particular angle where it shows its deepest and most beautiful colors. This summer, I have received emails from some of you, bits and pieces of news that opened your hearts. And not all of it was tragic, but a lot of it was. Some of those emails came to me from you with commentary, some of it with questions about what our church community could do. Some of it came with no words attached, just the news itself. And I think that sometimes silence is the most honest response. It can be hard to hold. One of my colleagues said to me recently that sometimes it's hard to keep telling people to pray for a new tragedy that happens every week. And I agree with her. Being open-hearted can leave me feeling raw. Occasionally it makes me want to resort to cynicism or to indifference. I am the first to admit that I fluctuate between compassion and fatigue, kindness and exhaustion. Sometimes I just want to turn the world off. But I wonder what would happen if we took Emerson's challenge today to see where that might lead us. Not to give us specific remedies to the situations that I have mentioned, but rather to give us some instruction on how to go on living in a broken world. Emerson has some instruction on this. He says that we should do broad justice to the place where we find ourselves. He suggests that if we take our situation and hold it and turn it, we might even find something beautiful there. What value could there possibly be in being overwhelmed by the heartbreak of the world? What good is there to feeling tired or frustrated or even cynical about the amount of pain in our world? Now, I don't mean for my answer to sound too easy or facile, and maybe it will sound this way. But this is what I have come to believe about this. The fissure, the split, the broken open place between our hope and our frustration expresses something very tender and human about us. It shows that there is a part of us that continues caring even when we do not have a clear way of expressing our care. That's why we become tired or frustrated or cynical, because there's no clear way to go on expressing our care. But we still care. We care nonetheless, and that tender yearning is good. I would say that it is one of the most decent and even noble parts of who we are. The world will break you open, but between the pain and the frustration just might be an aliveness, a humanness that we had not before noticed. There is something lustrous and beautiful in that, though maybe it only shows itself when we turn it in the light at the right angle. I learned an interesting fact this week. There is a variety of tree that is indigenous to Canada and the United States. On these trees, the seed cones are very thick and hard. They are literally glued shut with a strong resin. These cones are referred to as serotinous, which means late blooming or opening. A serotinous cone can hang on a tree for years without opening up to release its seeds. So this is what I learned. When a fire sweeps through an area with these trees, even as the tree is dying, the heat from the fire melts the resin, allowing the cones to open up and release the seeds. Sometimes the burned parts open up what is most alive. Amen. I love you, and blessings on your journey.